Good evening, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. A little bit about me. My name is Andy Upton. I am a planetarium presenter at Longway Planetarium. I also teach earth science, environmental science, and astronomy at the Henry Ford Academy. I, as well, am a NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador. And recently, I was named the most outstanding earth science teacher for the state of Michigan by the NAGT, or National Association of Geoscience Teachers. This presentation is about mass extinctions and basically asks the question, are we in one? So we have to know what a mass extinction is first. So what is it? Well, a mass extinction is a short period of Earth history during which rates of extinction reached exceptionally high levels, or the rate of extinction increases with respect to the background extinction rate and the rate of speciation. Throughout history, over the last 541 million years, there have been 5 major mass extinctions, where the extinction rate was significantly higher than the background extinction rate. This idea of mass extinction was popularized by Georges Cuvier and his theory of catastrophism. Essentially, what catastrophism says is that life is essentially static. It doesn't change for a very long period of time. And then there's a catastrophe where life is completely upended, wiped out completely, and a new set of living organisms takes their place. They exist for a while, then they're wiped out. And then another group of organisms takes their place, and so on, with the most recent mass extinction being Noah's flood, according to Georges Cuvier. That was the most recent of the mass extinctions. Now, some people didn't believe in mass extinction. These people were called gradualists, where they accepted that extinction was a thing, but they attributed it to a natural part of natural selection. And this is known as the background extinction. Background extinction is the standard rate of extinction in Earth's history before humans became a primary contributor of extinction. It's estimated to be about 1 extinction per million species years, which means for a million species, 1 species goes extinct every year. And again, this is a part of natural selection. It's a natural part of evolution, as set up by Charles Darwin. Darwin was a gradualist. He was not a catastrophist. He could not conceive of a mass extinction. That offended him. But he was a proponent of extinction in general because, again, he saw it as part of natural selection. Some animals or plants are selected against and thus go extinct. Now, the background extinction rate is essentially what's happening there in the background, like it says. And so the mass extinctions are significantly higher, not just higher, but significantly higher than the background extinction rate. Now, there are some people who didn't even accept this idea of background extinction or extinction in general. And one of these people is Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson refused to accept extinction on religious grounds. He could not conceive of a creator, of a divine creator, creating organisms and then allowing them to completely be wiped out. Which is why when he sent Lewis and Clark across the continent to the Pacific Ocean, he instructed them to bring back a woolly mammoth or a mastodon. He felt that they were still alive somewhere out west. We just hadn't found them yet. Of course, Lewis and Clark did not bring back a live one because they are extinct. But Jefferson just absolutely refused to accept that. So a little bit about Earth's history before we get into the extinctions. Earth's history is divided up into 4 types of time periods. There's the largest division, which is called an eon. Eons are the largest division of geologic time, and they can basically span millions of years to billions of years. There's no set time length for any one of these divisions. We are currently living in the Phanerozoic eon, which has been the last 541 million years. Now, eons are further subdivided into eras. Eras are smaller divisions, but again, do not have set lengths. We have identified 3 eras in the Phanerozoic eon. They are the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic era. Eras are further subdivided into periods. I'm not going to go through all the different periods of the Phanerozoic eon, but suffice to say, they give us the names of the extinctions: the Ordovician extinction, the Devonian extinction, the Permian extinction, the Triassic extinction, and the Cretaceous extinction. Those are all periods. Periods can then further be divided into epochs. And again, I'm not going to go through all the different epochs, but we live officially in what's known as the Holocene epoch of the Quaternary time period of the Cenozoic era of the Phanerozoic eon. We'll recap all that again later on. But before we do that, before we get to that, we need to start off with our first mass extinction, and that is the Ordovician extinction. The Ordovician extinction happened here between the Ordovician and the Silurian time periods. Now, the culprit for the Ordovician extinction is climate change. We will see climate change pop up frequently, so just be aware of that. And I will go into what climate change is later on. But this killed off about 85% of all marine species. Now, given that the vast majority of life on the planet was in the water, this is a significant amount of organisms that died out. That was a very tragic event. Not the biggest, but it was very tragic. Some causes of the climate change include volcanic eruptions. Volcanoes can lead to both cooling and heating. It just depends on what kind of volcano is actually erupting. This led to hypoxic, which means low oxygen environment, and anoxic, no oxygen environments out in the oceans. It also potentially punched holes in the ozone layer, which allowed UV radiation to come in unchecked and hit the Earth's surface. That's bad. So massive volcanic eruptions, hypoxic oceans or anoxic oceans, and holes in the ozone layer are all potential causes for the climate change that killed off 85% of marine species back at the end of the Ordovician time period. The reason we don't know specifically is because it happened so long ago. We're talking 450, 480 million years ago. So very long time ago. So we don't have as great data on this one or evidence as we do for some of the others. Some of the organisms that went extinct, or at least were hit very hard, include the corals. Corals did not go extinct. We have corals today, but there were some types of corals that did go extinct. Bivalves. Bivalves are clams or pelecypods, also did not go completely extinct, but some species definitely did. They were hit particularly hard. And the trilobites. Trilobites are ubiquitous in Paleozoic oceans, but some of them did go extinct during the Ordovician extinction. They were not wiped out, but they did take a hit, a pretty hard hit at that. Now, back to our timeline, we're going to move on to our next extinction, the Devonian extinction. The Devonian extinction happened actually over phases toward the end of the Devonian time period. So it was not a single event. It kind of fluctuated where some things went extinct and then more things went extinct and then more things went extinct. And so combining all of those extinctions gives you the Devonian extinction. The culprit, we know anoxic oceans is the culprit. No oxygen environment in the oceans. We know this. The problem is we don't know what caused anoxic oceans. But whatever did caused 75% of all species to go extinct. Some possible causes of anoxic oceans. Remember, anoxic means no oxygen environment. We have volcanism. Again, volcanoes affect the temperature of the ocean, and hot water does not hold on to gas as well. So even oxygen comes out of hot water. So if you're a fish and you're trying to swim around and breathe the oxygen in the water, and the oxygen is leaving the water because it's too hot, you're going to start suffocating. And that leads us also to another cause, potentially eutrophication. Now, eutrophication is a little unique to the Devonian extinction. It's probably the first time this is going to pop, or the only time this is going to pop up here. We deal with eutrophication today in various waterways, specifically places like Lake Erie, the Gulf of Mexico, the Chesapeake Bay, Mediterranean Sea, and other locations like that. Essentially what happens is it's a form of nutrient pollution. Too many nutrients get into the water, and that leads to an explosion of algae, and we call these algal blooms. And these algal blooms block sunlight from the bottom of the waterway, which kills off the plants down there. And then the algae themselves die. And as the algae dies, it pulls out oxygen from the environment as it decays. Same thing with the grass down at the bottom of the waterway. Well, as they die and pull out oxygen, the oxygen content of the water goes down. The fish and other organisms that live in the water and rely on that oxygen, they start suffocating, and then they eventually die as well and then when they decay, they pull out yet more oxygen, and so you get dead zones as a result. We have cultural eutrophication today in places like, again, Lake Erie, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Chesapeake Bay from runoff from farms, but it's still the same principle. And our final possible cause is global cooling, not global warming, but it's still a form of climate change. The volcanism, as I mentioned in the Ordovician extinction, can cause warming or cooling. And in this particular case, we think it caused cooling, that massive amounts of debris were thrown into the atmosphere, which caused a cooling event. And we know that there was extensive glaciation there at the end of the Devonian time period. So it's possible that global cooling led to the anoxic oceans, because cold water actually can be anoxic as well as hot water. So global cooling could cause these things. But we know there were anoxic oceans. How do we know that? Because we find a lot of shale, black shale from this time period. And shale is a mudstone, and if the mud is black, it has very low oxygen content because it has a high iron content. So it hasn't rusted. So if we find black shales, that usually indicates a very low oxygen environment to no oxygen environment. Also, we'll find pyrite. Pyrite is fool's gold, and it forms in a reducing atmosphere, or a reducing environment, not a oxidizing environment, such as an oxygen-rich waterway. So it's a little unique, the Devonian extinction, in the sense that it was a cold event, possibly, that caused this particular anoxic phase in the oceans. Some things that were hit hard during the Devonian extinction, we have our trilobites again, not completely knocked out, but they did take another major hit, as did corals once again. But we also had some extinctions in the vertebrate realm. Finally, we have vertebrates to kill off, and that includes such things as the placoderms. Placoderms are armored fish. Some of them were gigantic, such as this guy here seen in the picture. This is Dunkleosteus. And Dunkleosteus was bigger than a human and probably could have sheared one of us in half with these massive jaws and the shearing plates that it has for teeth. Monstrous fish, but it was a fish nonetheless. But the placoderms got completely decimated by this particular extinction. Now, we're going to head off to the Permian extinction. Things calmed down for a while in Earth's history, and about 252 million years ago, things kind of went wonky. This is the end Permian extinction, and is the biggest extinction in Earth's history, caused by volcanism and climate change. We actually know quite a bit about this particular extinction, and again, it almost wiped out everything. An estimated 95% of species, that's land and water, went extinct during this particular extinction event. 95% of all life on the planet died out. That is incredible. That is just the closest to the brink of annihilation that we have ever come. without actually crossing over. So life almost got completely wiped out at the end of the Permian period. And so basically what happened is there was a massive volcanic eruption in what is now Siberia. So we call it the Siberian Traps. The Siberian Traps seen in this image outlined in black include a massive area where it was just a volcanic flood of lava, and the volcano erupted for thousands of years uninterrupted. So if you can imagine a volcano erupting, okay, that's done. It's over with. But this one just kept erupting, pumping out large amounts of ash, large amounts of CO2, carbon dioxide, and it caused massive climate change, rapid climate change. The initial eruption threw so much debris into the atmosphere that it actually blocked the sun and cooled the earth down. So you have global cooling to start things off. And given that the most complex life forms on land at the time were reptiles, the reptiles cannot handle swift changes in temperature. So some of them died out as a result. Some did not, obviously, because they're still around. But then there was the heat. As the volcano continued to erupt day after day, year after year, it was pumping out massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And this carbon dioxide heated the planet up, and it actually caused the oceans to heat up as well, which then set off another cause. And this is shown in pink here on our modern day map. The pink areas seen on this map are methane hydrates or clathrates. Methane hydrates are basically frozen methane at the bottom of the ocean. Very, very, very sensitive to changes in temperature. So as the temperature rose in the ocean, the methane sublimated, went from solid to gas instantly, and turned into gas bubbles that rose through the water and entered our atmosphere, which is a bad thing because methane is about 25 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas, which means one methane molecule is equal to 25 carbon dioxide molecules. Why aren't we more worried about methane today than we are about carbon dioxide? Because methane doesn't last long in our atmosphere. It lasts for a few decades, whereas CO2 lasts for hundreds of years. So there's a difference. There's a trade-off with that potency. But one way or the other, the methane hydrates at the bottom of the ocean sublimated and rose through the water column where they went into the atmosphere, causing an even faster heating episode, which warmed the oceans and set off more methane hydrates. The oceans eventually turned pink due to anoxia. The oceans, as they warmed, released their gases, including CO2 and including oxygen again. And as the oceans became more and more anoxic, it became a breeding ground for a particular bacteria called purple sulfur bacteria. The purple sulfur bacteria turned the oceans pink. They live in a reducing environment, in a low oxygen or no oxygen environment. And so, given that the oceans were massively without oxygen, they proliferated and turned the oceans pink. So, you had massive volcanic eruption, you had methane hydrates sublimating at the bottom of the ocean, and you had pink oceans. All of this conspired to kill off 95% of the organisms on the planet. It was again the worst mass extinction in history. Some things that were hit especially hard include our trilobite friends. Trilobites finally met their match. They finally came to an end here during the end of the Permian period. Eurypterids, which are giant sea scorpions, some as long as a human is tall. They also went extinct completely during the Permian extinction. And finally, we have some reptiles that went extinct. This particular reptile is not a dinosaur. This is called Dimetrodon. Dimetrodon is a mammal-like reptile in the sense that it's more related to us than it is to, say, a bearded dragon or something along those lines. It is a very unique organism. but it is not a dinosaur. I want to stress that. It is not a dinosaur, but it did go extinct during the Permian period, or at the end of the Permian period. Now, things did not last long in kind of a recovery session before we got hit with another mass extinction at the end of the Triassic period. At the end of the Triassic period, we have volcanism again. We have climate change again, killing off about 76% of all species on the planet. The volcanism came from the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, which is in the middle of Pangaea. This is Pangaea's time to shine. So in the middle of it, this massive volcanic eruption spewed out large amounts of CO2 and lava and set forth another or triggered another positive feedback loop where the warming warmed the oceans, released the CO2, which warmed the air, which warmed the oceans, and on it goes. So it led to global warming. And ocean acidification. Now, ocean acidification happened during the Devonian, the Permian, and the Ordovician extinctions as well, because you've got a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. A lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, when it mixes with water, becomes an acid. And so you got a lot of acidification, but it wasn't as big a player in those extinctions as it was in this particular extinction. So the oceans became more acidic. As they are doing today, they are becoming more acidic. Some things that were hit hard include the eddisaurs. They were completely wiped out. The phytosaurs were completely wiped out. And the Rauisuchians were completely wiped out. These particular organisms look like dinosaurs, but they're not dinosaurs. The phytosaurs look like crocodiles, but they're not crocodiles. The reason they look so similar is that they're all cousins. The crocodiles and alligators are cousins to the phytosaurs, which are cousins to the eddisaurs, which are cousins to the Rauisuchians, which are cousins to the dinosaurs. They're all related in a very broad manner. But for whatever reason, the crocodiles, the alligators, and the dinosaurs survived the Triassic extinction, whereas these three, which were more dominant than the others, did not. Why that is anybody's guess, really. Extinctions don't have to make sense as far as what lives and what doesn't. That's the key thing to understand about extinctions. Your natural selection cannot select you to survive an extinction, a mass extinction, because mass extinctions are fluke events that come about every few hundred or every few million years, and average about every 100 million years, actually. So you cannot be selected for certain advantages that would get you through that. But for whatever reason, the dinosaurs did survive, and they dominated the Earth like no other creature has ever done on our planet, in the sense of the number of species, the sheer volume of them, the size of them, and all of that. Nothing has matched it ever since. Things quieted down as the dinosaurs dominated, but 66, 65 million years ago, we have yet another mass extinction. This is probably the most famous mass extinction in history, the end of the dinosaurs. So the culprit, an asteroid impact for the first time. We're actually getting an asteroid impact as well as volcanism. So it's not just climate change that killed them. It's not just volcanism that killed them. There's something else going on, and we do believe it was an asteroid impact. About 75% of all species went extinct during this particular extinction. So not the biggest, not the smallest either. It's on par with the other extinctions, actually. But the dead are more famous, if you will, than the other extinctions. So we do know there was an asteroid impact off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in what is called the Chicxulub crater. This was discovered in 1988 by oil drillers or oil explorers off the coast of the Yucatan. They found a ring-like structure in their drill cores, And so they notified geologists and paleontologists, and it just so happened that about 8 years before, a father-son team of Walter Alvarez, the son, and Luis Alvarez, the father, um, basically made the claim that an asteroid crashed into the Earth and caused the mass extinction. And they did so on the basis of some evidence from the boundary layer of mud between the Cretaceous time period and what was then known as the Tertiary time period, but today is known as the Paleogene time period. It's a layer of mud about an inch, 2 inches, 3 inches thick. And Walter's idea was to measure how long that layer, or how long it took to deposit that particular layer of clay. And he went to his dad, Nobel Prize laureate Luis Alvarez, who was a physicist, to help. And his dad suggested looking at iridium. Iridium comes from space. It gently falls to Earth constantly. And we know it's a fairly constant rate, and we can measure that constant rate. So if we can measure the constant rate of the iridium in this particular sample, then it should tell us how long it took to deposit this mud. They found a spike of iridium. Now, two things could cause that spike. Either the core of the Earth was belched out onto the surface, or a rock from space ran into the planet. It's more likely a rock from space ran into the planet. Initially, they were laughed at and ridiculed, but eventually they had their moment in the sun when they discovered the crater. And pretty soon after that, all the mass extinctions were being explained by asteroid impact, but only this one has the evidence to go with it. The asteroid impact potentially triggered, but may not have, a volcanic event in what is now India called the Deccan Traps. You can see the extent of the volcanism in that particular map there. The Deccan Traps happened, geologically speaking, at about the same time as the asteroid impact. Did one cause the other? Probably not. Obviously, the volcano could not cause the asteroid impact, but it's possible that the asteroid impact caused the volcanic event. But chances are very much against that. We know they both happened, and they both had dire consequences for life on Earth. The asteroid impact would have vaporized the rock in the water immediately surrounding the impact site, would have sent a massive tsunami rolling across the entire planet. The debris thrown up into the atmosphere and beyond the atmosphere came back to the Earth and as flaming balls of debris and caught massive areas of forest on fire. So, and then it also blocked out the sun, which led to a global cooling event, as well as it led to a global warming event as well, because you have the volcanism at the Deccan Traps, you have massive amounts of fires burning, and that threw out enough CO2 to cause a climate shift. And so this climate shift, in addition to the asteroid impact and the volcanism, is what caused the extinction. Extinctions are rarely caused by one single event. There's generally something else going on. And again, climate change is one of those things that seems to be fairly ubiquitous here. We've seen volcanism, we've seen climate change pop up time and time again. So what went extinct? Well, the marine reptiles certainly went extinct. There are no plesiosaurs or mosasaurs or ichthyosaurs or pliosaurs or anything like that in our oceans today. Ammonites took a huge hit and went extinct. We know the nautilus shells of the nautilus, the chambered nautilus, that's probably one of the only holdovers from the Cretaceous in terms of coiled shelled animals. But the ammonites did go extinct. And then, of course, my beloved dinosaurs. I've always loved the dinosaurs, but they definitely went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period. Some dinosaurs made it through. We call them birds today. And an irony of all ironies, the craziest thing out there is dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, because it's actually made out of dinosaur and they're shaped like dinosaurs. So I find that to be the most ironic thing that's out there. So that brings us to modern day. Well, not yet. We're going to take a pit stop before we get to the modern day um, extinction. And we're going to stop at something called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM. The PETM occurred about 55 million years ago, and it was a time when CO2 levels were at their absolute highest for the last 65 million years. So in the last 65 million years, the Cenozoic era, the CO2 levels have never been higher than what they were at the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. And temperatures were incredibly high then as well as a result of the increased CO2. We're talking about CO2 levels up around 1,200 parts per million. And it was probably started due to volcanic activity once again that again caused the oceans to warm and release the methane hydrates in the oceans, and it was a cascade of events. The CO2 came from the CO2 levels, the increased water temperature, releasing CO2 into the atmosphere, and basically caused a massive spike in the CO2, as we can see in this particular graph. So we had alligators in the Arctic. We had palm leaves above the Arctic Circle. Antarctica was still green and lush. It was a time of incredibly high sea levels. Sea levels were probably at their highest at this point. It was a warm world, far warmer than what exists on Earth today, and that's a good thing that we're not that warm yet. So anyway, if you notice, there are steep declines in the CO2 in a stair-step fashion that brings us to today, and you see a slight uptick in the CO2 levels from what it's been over the last 800,000 years. So what's going on today? Well, we have the age of exploration and the Columbian Exchange altering life on Earth, the Earth's flora and fauna. The overuse of fossil fuels has raised carbon concentrations to 417 parts per million. That is global average. If you follow Mauna Loa's observatory, you'll see numbers like 423, 424, but globally, it's 417 parts per million. The concentration, however, could get as high as 900 parts per million by 2100. That's only 77 years from now. By the year 2100, it's possible that we're up around 900 parts per million or higher than that. It depends on what we choose to do now. So, as far as extinctions go, what's happening or what happened? Well, in the last 50,000 years, give or take, Ice Age mammals, very large Ice Age animals, we call them megafauna, have gone extinct. We're talking mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, horses in the North American continent, glyptodonts in South American continent, and short-faced cave bears, American lions, and so forth. All these really big Ice Age animals have gone extinct. This corresponds to human migration patterns from across the land bridge from Asia into the North and South America, and migration patterns also out of Africa. So could this be the reason why the megafauna went extinct? Did we overhunt them? It's a potential possibility because we have found Ice Age animal skeletons with spear points inside them or arrowheads inside them. So it's possible that we overhunted them. With our technology and our very large brains, it is possible that we wiped them out. It also corresponds to the end of the Ice Age. The Ice Age comes and goes. It kind of waxes and wanes like the moon phases. But the Ice Age the last Ice Age, or the glacial period of the last Ice Age, was about 11,800 years ago. So we haven't had any megafauna since. So could that be the reason why these animals went extinct? Right now, we're leaning toward the overhunting, but there's still a lot of questions to be answered. The age of exploration, and we're talking very recent times, we're talking about the 1400s and 1500s and 1600s and so forth, humans began to set sail. Islands were hit especially hard because islands are usually small microcosms. So they're isolated from the outside world until the outside world comes to them. And we saw a massive die-off of organisms. Just to name a few here, we have the great auk, which is the original penguin. There are no penguins in the northern hemisphere. Why not? Because we killed them all. I'm sorry, but that's just what happened. Sailors would land on an island where the great auk was. The great auk had no knowledge of humans, and they would literally walk up to the great auk and wring its neck or hit it over the head with a board or a stick. That's what they would do until they wiped them all out, and now they're no longer to be found. Stellar sea cow was a dugong, or similar to a manatee, and it lived in the Bering Strait and along the Aleutian Islands. And Russian fur traders basically landed on these islands, and they found these large cow-like creatures eating seagrass swimming up to their boats, and they were hungry, and they saw this as an opportunity to get fresh meat into their diets, and so they killed them, and then they killed more, and then they killed more, and they killed more, thinking that around the next island you'd find more, until they ran out of islands, and they ran out of stellar sea cows, and now they don't exist anymore. The dodo, the quintessential animal of extinction, it's kind of the poster child of extinctions. And it was a fairly large flightless bird, medium-sized flightless bird, I guess you could call it, living on an island in the Indian Ocean. And it didn't know humans at all. And so it waddled up to the first humans, probably sailors, that came across and landed on the island. And it waddled up, and they saw a big chicken-like thing coming up to them, not scared, and they killed it. And they discovered that they could do it very easily, and they killed them all until the island held no more dodo. And it just so happened that there are no more dodo to be found. The moa in New Zealand. The moa had lived with people for thousands of years. There are people in New Zealand for thousands of years. But during the age of exploration, Europeans specifically came to the island of New Zealand and discovered the moa, a very large flightless bird, and wiped them all out. They don't exist anymore. These are just a few organisms that we have killed just out of hunger or sport or who knows what other reason there is. We've exterminated these animals from the earth. They don't exist anymore because of us. The Columbian Exchange. Let the invasion begin. The Columbian Exchange refers to the exchange of plants, animals, people, cultures, and ideas between the Old World and the New World, facilitated by the beginning of Columbus's voyage across the Atlantic. This exchange had facilitated an invasion, and native species have taken a huge hit. Things like tumbleweed. What would the West be without tumbleweed? But tumbleweed is an invasive species. It's a Russian thistle. It's native to Russia, not to the United States. People brought it over, planted it, and it got out of control. Kudzu in my native South. It's a plant that was brought over to try to stop erosion, and it worked. It stopped erosion. But now it's taken over everything. It will cut. Basically, the joke is that if you stand still too long, you'll get covered over by kudzu. And it's only a half joke because kudzu will cover everything if it sits long enough. Native species here in the Great Lakes have been hit hard by some invasives, including the sea lamprey. The sea lamprey is a non-native species that has come in. It's an invasive, and it did a terrible number on the native lake trout population. We're holding them in check now, but they're still here. They're still there out in the lakes. And of course, the zebra mussel is there in the Great Lakes as well. It's been estimated that if you were to drain the lakes, you could walk from Michigan to Wisconsin and never step off of zebra mussels or its cousin, the quagga mussels. They're everywhere. They're everywhere, and they're hurting the native species because the native species don't have any defense against these things. So we created this. We did this. So does this mean we're in an extinction? Well, let's talk about that. The fossil record is incomplete. We know of the previous extinctions because of the fossil record. We know that things were there before the extinction and things aren't there after the extinction. We can see that in the fossil record. But the problem is the fossil record has a bias toward hard parts such as bones, teeth, and shell, and against soft bodies such as like a jellyfish. We don't have many jellyfish fossils. We don't have many octopus fossils. We don't have many starfish fossils. Not compared to, say, a vertebrate or a shell, like clams or brachiopods or even the trilobites. So it's incomplete, and there's a bias within the fossil record. Now, what about today? Well, we're monitoring extinctions in real time. We know when an animal goes extinct, for the most part. We can watch it go extinct now. We have documentation of it going extinct. Now, does this mean that it's comparable to the fossil extinction rate? Well, could it just be a recency bias? Because we're watching it happen in real time. Whereas the fossil record, we don't have a full account of everything that went extinct or everything that even didn't go extinct. So possibly it's a recency bias. I don't think so necessarily, but it is something that has to be considered. And then, of course, time is a factor. Time is a factor because we're watching extinctions happen over the course of a few hundred years, whereas the fossil record has extinctions over thousands of years. Now, the picture here is of the golden toad, often cited as the first victim of climate change. It lived in the Central American mountains on little puddles created by fog. And then the fog shifted due to shifting weather patterns due to climate change, and the frog no longer has any puddles to basically spawn in. So are we dealing with a modern extinction? Well, it is quite possible. The background extinction rate is, as you can see down there, fairly low, and we have wiped out so many animals over the course of the last few hundred years. So are we in a sixth extinction? Well, we're definitely in a new age. We're at the start of the Anthropocene. As I mentioned, we're officially living in the Holocene epoch, Quaternary period, Cenozoic era of the Phanerozoic eon. But humans have made such an impact on the geologic record that we're entering a new epoch. We're entering the Anthropocene. The problem is, when do we start it? My personal favorite starting point is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But a lot of people are thinking maybe the beginning of the nuclear age. Whatever the case may be, we are living in the Anthropocene. It hasn't been officially designated yet, simply because we can't find a starting point. But that is immaterial to us today because we are living in the Anthropocene. So the Anthropocene epoch, the culprit, us. Is it us? Is it not us? Extinction total, to be determined. We don't know what's all going to go extinct. We don't know when this is going to end. Is it from overhunting? Is it from invasive species? Or is it from climate change? Or all three of them together? One way or the other, we have a part to play in every single one of them. So climate change, I'm running out of time here, but climate change very quickly is essentially the greenhouse effect gone haywire. We're adding more greenhouse gases to the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is good. It keeps us alive. It keeps the planet warm for us to live. But adding more and more of these greenhouse gases to it has increased the warming. It's not that the planet is warming, it's how fast the planet is warming. That's the problem. And the planet is warming at ever alarming rates. It's estimated by the year 2100, if we literally do nothing about climate change, which we have done some stuff, but if we did nothing, we could reach 1,255 parts per million. That's PETM levels. But the PETM happened over the course of about 10,000 years or 20,000 years. We're doing it over the course of 400 years. We're doing it 50 times faster than the PETM. And nothing alive during the PETM is alive today. We are Ice Age animals. We're products of the Ice Age. So the Earth has never been as hot as it is today in our lifetimes, in human experience, existence. So, final questions. Is this the sixth extinction? I think yes. Each year, more and more animals go on the endangered list, but very few come off of it due to recovery. If they do come off, that's usually because they went extinct. When will it end? We don't know. It may end with the extinction of humans. It may not. Who knows? Who's to say when it will come to an end? We don't get to make that call because it's so far into the future. Thanks for coming out and visiting us here at Longway Planetarium. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I know I certainly had fun doing it, and I hope you come back and visit us for some of our other programs. Thank you.